contest show in the land. The Las Vegas Football Contest Show focuses on Circa Sports Million, Circa Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With two former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Carlos Alcaraz has won the last two Grand Slam titles at the French Open on the clay and at Wimbledon earlier this summer. He enters as the favorite.
You have a bunch of depth there. Francis Tiafoe, Ben Shelton. They will likely play in round three. The winner would play Djokovic, most likely, which would be an incredible match. I like Ben Shelton as a sleeper. If Djokovic is hurt, you never know. I think Shelton's actually the guy that gets hot. The conditions favor him.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
When you're really, really amazing like this, people kind of take it for granted. Same with Ohtani, right? People will sort of see, oh, Ohtani did this, Ohtani did that, and it sort of, becomes normalized a little bit. But to put in context, Aaron Judge joins the 1,000 hit club, reaches, gets it done. So earlier this month, he was the fastest player to reach 300 home runs ever.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
The leftover language would be the million shy of what Jefferson makes Jefferson a better player. If you want to believe that, I'm not sure I buy that he's that much better than CeeDee Lamb.
Tony Pollard's gone. He's now with the Titans. I was with the Titans a couple weeks ago. He'll be their starting running back there. They're going a different direction in Dallas, but it's all about CeeDee Lamb right now, the first of the other deals that they have to get done.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only. And welcome in a very happy Tuesday now, November the 5th, Election Day here in the United States. And we've got, some NFL football teams electing to get rid of maybe a little bit of dead weight, and a whole bunch of NFL teams looking to bolster their rosters as the NFL trade deadline has now come and gone, and there are plenty of teams that made moves before the 4 o'clock Eastern time deadline here. We're going to go over a few and get you caught up with what's happening on that front. I'm Joe Raineri here on the SportsGrid Network. We appreciate you stopping by, as we also have the start of Maction football. Doesn't get any better than that, does it? A little Tuesday college football action, 2 games in the MAC getting ready to kick off a little bit later. Of course, Bowling Green taking on the Chippewas of Central Michigan. That game, both of these games, in fact, looking by the spreads, we're talking about double digits here in both this game as well as the other one involving Miami of Ohio taking on Ball State. And Ball State, that game kicking off 8 o'clock Eastern time here. Ball State coming off a unbelievable win, an upset win at that over Northern Illinois. You remember Northern Illinois, the team that ended up setting Notre Dame early in the season. Yeah, while Ball State, things were not looking good this season with them, and why would they? They're an atrocious team on so many different levels. However, they did muster a great game. Great effort against a much better and more experienced Northern Illinois team last week. Now they're welcoming in a red-hot Miami of Ohio Redhawks team who has won 3 straight and have scored no less than 30 points in each of those games. Interesting tidbit of information. We gave this out this morning on the early line, Ben Stevens and myself. We couldn't believe this trend, but it is a fact when it comes to midweek Maction football and double-digit favorites. Over the last decade, folks, those double-digit favorites are 65-9 straight up. They're also better than 62% against the number. So they have been a very good option to bet midweek. Those double-digit favorites, they're double-digit favorites for a reason. That is an absurd number. In fact, just a year ago, in the opening week of Maction midweek football, those double-digit favorites went 6-0 straight up, 5-1 against the number. So it is a trend that seems in Maction football, and we always get craziness during the week when it comes to Maction football. It's part of the reason that we love having that midweek football out of this conference, because you really never know what's going to happen. But you kind of know what's going to happen when you have double-digit favorites, because over the last decade, 65-9 straight up tells us the double-digit favorites might not be a bad look here tonight. So that being also Bowling Green as well as Miami of Ohio. And keep in mind, both of those double-digit favorites are road favorites. Also, plenty of terrible weather being expected there in the mid-region, looking at 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts, in fact, with the Ball State game and Miami of Ohio. Not going to be any better, by the way, when it comes to the Bowling Green game. So a lot of running, and those teams that can run the ball will have a lot of success. Not sure a lot of teams are going to have great success throwing the ball here tonight, but those teams that can play some defense, those teams that can run the ball should have plenty of success. Or maybe the better look across the board tonight are the unders in both of those games. The NBA tonight off for Election Day. They will resume tomorrow with a full slate. The NHL, not so much. They got a whole lot of games going on here tonight, 11, in fact, I believe, across the board. So the NHL coming off a night, and very weird scheduling in the NHL this year. I don't know if you've noticed it. We go from having 2 games to 10 games to 1 game to 9 games. The whole scheduling is very weird in the NHL to start the season. 2 games last night, loaded slate across the board here tonight. So we will talk plenty of NHL hockey as we're approaching the first full month of the season in the books. Joe Madden will stop by. We'll get her thoughts on some of these games coming up here tonight, with the puck dropping in just about an hour in many of them. But we had mentioned, of course, the trade deadline for the NFL. It has come, it is gone. A number of big names, in fact, have changed teams. Not something we're used to seeing all that much in the NFL. It's not like Major League Baseball or some other leagues where, like the NBA, where you could see big name guys trading uniforms mid-season. But we've already seen it, right? Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, a couple of big names. We saw D-Hop last night also wearing a Kansas City Chiefs uniform. So we have seen already a whole lot of big movement with big names. And today was no different. And it all started, of course, with the Saints looking to restart here. And who can blame them, as the Saints have decided that it is time to move on from Marshawn Lattimore. And Washington was more than happy to take him off their hands. The all-pro cornerback is now a Commander, and that is a massive move for a Commanders team who is pushing all in on this season. Let's face it, they're 7-2 right now. They're looking to contend. They're not looking for the future. They've got a lot of young pieces in that secondary. The thing that they lacked, of course, was that mainstay, that force in a cornerback spot, a shutdown corner. And Lattimore is going to go a long way into giving this Commanders and Dan Quinn, their head coach, a pretty good opportunity to give Philadelphia a run for the money. And I say that because we're not really expecting the Dallas Cowboys to make a comeback, are we? No? Okay, I didn't think so. So that is just one of the big names here. You got to love that, too, with Washington now. They've got their quarterback. They've got a new head coach. They've got new ownership. They've got new everything there. And we're also hearing rumors all week long that, in fact, they are pretty darn excited because players are telling their agents Washington is a destination that they want to go play at. We have not heard that since the Joe Gibbs era. Many moons ago there, players wanting to go to Washington. Most players have tried to get the hell out of Washington under the former ownership group. But looks like word is traveling, and it looks like the Commanders are a prime destination. Another big name, Mike Williams, wide receiver, formerly of the New York Jets, now a Pittsburgh Steeler, as they swapped a 5th-round pick for the Jets. And the Jets, of course, have, Williams was only on $1 million deal. Very affordable situation there for the Jets to get a 5th-round pick or anything even remotely close to that for him, who had fallen out of favor with Aaron Rodgers since he can't run the right routes, not to mention Devontae Adams in uniform, made him expendable. And the Jets, I think, did a pretty good job in getting a nice draft pick in turn for a receiver who they weren't going to re-sign anyway. What does it mean for the Steelers? How about Detroit and the move we heard? Plenty more to get to here as the trade date is come and gone, and we're just getting started here on Game Time Decisions.
Enter into the magical world of McLuck.com, where even the smallest of spins can win real cash prizes. Adventure into over 1,000 of the best Vegas-style slot games. So what are you waiting for? Unlock your free welcome offer today. Join the fun where winners play and players win.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in Game Time Decisions here on this Tuesday now, November the 5th. I'm Joe Raineri, joined by Joe Madden, getting ready on this election day here in the States. Joe, we don't have any NBA, but boy, do we have some NHL action here. They're ramping back up. I believe 22 of the 32 teams in action here tonight. And let's start with your favorite team, I'm sorry. Did it count? No. Yeah, Toronto. I'm sorry. The Boston Bruins at the Toronto Maple Leafs, dropping the puck here in little less than an hour. What are we thinking here? Back-to-back shutouts, I believe, against the Flyers and the Kraken over the weekend for the Bruins. Maybe they have figured some things out. They certainly gave their goalie enough money to try and do that. But what are we thinking about Toronto, I believe, at home in this one as well?
Toronto at home in this one should have home ice advantage, Joe, but you look at that price and then you start looking at how Boston has completely dominated the Toronto Maple Leafs, and you can't lay the juice here on Toronto. You've got to look at the Boston Bruins to be able to come out and do what they've always been doing, which is beating Toronto. They've won the last 8 meetings. 5 of those have been in that underdog role. People in the books just can't get behind Toronto really as an underdog. It rarely happens, and you're always paying overpriced value for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I'm going to look at the Boston Bruins here. I do think they can pull off the upset here on the road. And that being said, you're not getting as much value as you were getting earlier in the day. It was up to plus 130 earlier in the day, and that line is coming down. But this is going to be a competitive Atlantic divisional matchup between these two. I do think we have every opportunity of going to overtime. That's coming in at plus 380. So I'm going to take this to go to overtime. I'm also going to take the Bruins to pull it out and get the win. If you're looking for goal scorers here, William Nylander is so strong, and I do think he steps up with Matthews out of the lineup. He's coming in at plus 180 for the anytime goal for Toronto, and Brad Marchand coming out here at plus 270 for the Boston Bruins is my favorite prop bet of the night, Joe.
I'm laughing too here because you're right, Joe. As I'm seeing this here, Boston's won 8 straight regular season meetings of Toronto. When you talk about domination, you're not kidding. Boston has owned Toronto, even the playoffs aside. But you're also right. I mean, Marchand and Pastrnak have just owned the Maple Leafs in their careers, and that's not a bad price on Marchand for an anytime goal. I believe he's got 20 goals and 54 points in 54 career games. There is a good chance he's going to be scoring here tonight in this game against them. I like the overtime goal as well. Talk to me here about the Senators taking on the Penguins here tonight in Pittsburgh for this one. How are you looking at it?
Which one? Okay, the Pittsburgh Penguins are playing the Islanders. The Senators are playing the Buffalo.
I'm sorry, no. Yeah. Go to the Penguins. I'm sorry, not the Senators. Give me the Penguins and the Islanders. My bad.
Yeah,
in New York.
This is going to be an interesting one here in New York. Sorokin is confirmed in net for the Islanders, and we know how strong he has been this season. But I look at the Pittsburgh Penguins rolling in here. That value keeps going up, and you know I love backing the dogs, especially when you've got Sidney Crosby playing so hot at the moment. I do think the Pittsburgh Penguins can roll in to New York and get the win tonight. Grab them plus the 114. Look at Sidney Crosby for his points in this matchup. I don't love the scheduling spot here for the Islanders. When we look at the scheduling spot, they're off the loss to the Rangers on Sunday. That was a 5-2. This is their first game home off a 3-game road trip. But, Joe, it gets worse. I love fading teams off the road trip and teams, especially when they're headed right back out. And this team is headed right back out on Thursday versus the Ottawa Senators. So they've only got this one game here at home. For the Islanders, it's a perfect situation to fade them. You just can't lay that kind of juice on the Islanders at the moment either, because their PK is so weak. It's only 65.2%. We look here at the power play of the Pittsburgh Penguins. It should be strong enough to take advantage of this weak PK. So I'm looking for the Pittsburgh Penguins to be able to come out strong on their power play opportunities and to be able to convert those goals. Now, I do like Sidney Crosby for the 2+ points, but you could also look at Michael Bunting here. He has been really strong when he comes out versus the Islanders. He's got an assist in the last 3 games versus them. If you can get his assist on your book or his point, I would look at that. And then that power play, you've got Malkin, you've got Crosby, you've got Carlson, and Raquel. I'm looking at Carlson for the power play point tonight, Joe.
Any interest in the under? I know Sorokin is always good at home there. And actually, I mean, the goalie for Pittsburgh's actually been pretty good. 2 goals on 50 shots here in the last couple of games. The number was 6.5. It's 6 now. Are you expecting Pittsburgh dominate? Islanders a little less, maybe a little less offense in this one?
Yeah, I would look at that lower scoring game. The problem is
Yeah.
the Pittsburgh Penguins have been allowing those goals, but you said it. Their goaltender really has stepped up as of late, and Sorokin's been playing strong. So I think the Islanders offensively can be anemic in some of these games, and I expect this to be one of those games where we're not seeing a lot of goals out of them. So I would take this to the under way before I took it to the over, Joe.
All right, let's talk about Ottawa now, who is traveling to Buffalo to take on the Sabres, who are, look at that, now on a 3-game losing streak here. They haven't been terrible, but they also just have not gotten enough goals in order to have enough offense, really, to be able to break this skid. Do they do it tonight at home against Ottawa and Ullmark?
This is a hard one because I do have a lot of faith in both of these teams, Joe. I think both of these teams are going to surprise a lot of people and make it to the playoffs. It's just they've had a rough start to the season between the both. I'm looking here at Ullmark and I'm looking at his numbers when he faces Buffalo, and those career numbers are so strong that I do think the Ottawa Senators have the edge in this game because of that. Versus Buffalo, in his 5 career games, he's got a 1.82 goals against average with a save percentage of 945. When we look at Lankaken on the other side, he's got solid, decent numbers on the season, but versus the Ottawa Senators, that is where he has really struggled. That save percentage drops to 853, a 5.14 goals against average. So it's not pretty. It's a small sample size, though, only 3 games versus the Ottawa Senators, but I do think the Sens will score on him tonight. I'm taking the Senators team total over 3.5. It's coming in at plus 130. Now, Buffalo could still win it. I could see it being a 5-4 win for Buffalo or a 5-4 win for the Ottawa Senators. I think we get the goals tonight.
Yeah, I like the over. I'm with you on that one. All right, we got plenty more NHL games to go over. Game Time Decisions continues here on the grid.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at a Heisman with those 2 games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those 2 games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. What is he, a 6th-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in. Game Time Decisions here on the Sports Grid Network. I'm Joe Raineri, joined again by Joe Madden, talking little bit of NHL here. Why? Well, 11 games on the slate will do that. The NHL just can't figure out the scheduling here. They give us 2 games. They give us 11 games. They'll give us 3 tomorrow. Then they'll give us another 11 on Thursday. We're all over the map with the NHL, but plenty of opportunities here as this season, a couple of weeks into the season here, Joe, and the brand new Utah Hockey Club on the road, taking on your Winnipeg Jets here. And Utah started off, 3-0? And now it feels like they're having a hard time stringing some wins together here. Never easy. I mean, it looks like Winnipeg is finally starting to hit their stride. 3 straight wins there. One of the best goalies in the NHL. What happens in this game?
Oh, well, you got to expect Winnipeg to be able to score those goals, right? This team is averaging just under 5 goals per game, highest shooting percentage in the whole league. This power play is converting 44.1% of the time. Not a strong enough kill here for Utah, and Utah finds himself in the box each and every single game for way too many minutes, Joe. They're averaging 11 minutes in the box per game. Utah was the Arizona Coyotes for anyone who doesn't know this, and when you look at Winnipeg versus the Arizona Coyotes, the last time that team beat Winnipeg was back in 2021. So I can't put money on Utah in this situation because we know it is the same organization here, just with a different name and yes, in a different arena. But I think Utah will struggle in this one. I'm taking their team total under 2.5 goals. That's coming in at -112. I think the Jets can win it. The problem here is when the Jets have won these games, they haven't really been blowing them out of the water. So they're sitting first in the Central, 4th in the Central for Utah. I don't want to hit that puck line. So I will fade Utah's team total. I think Mark Scheifele, you want to look at for the anytime goal. His anytime goal coming in at +185. He's had at least 1 goal in 5 of the last 6 games at home here for the Winnipeg Jets. This team's going to convert on the power play. They're going to get those goals on the board. If you just want to look at their team total to the over, you can do that as well. Vejmelka is confirmed in goal here. For Utah, he's yet to record a win on the season, sitting 0-2 with a 3.04 goals against average. It's going to be the penalties that does it in tonight for Utah. So look at those power play points as well, Joe.
All right, looking for some goals there. How about the Tampa Bay Lightning kind of limping into this game tonight? They've given up, I think, 12 goals in their last 2 games. They won't have, it looks like, Braden Point either. But St. Louis is missing a ton of dudes as well here. So I believe Vasilevsky in goal here. Binnington for St. Louis. Boy, if this was like 4 years ago, this would be a hell of an under to bet. But I just don't know that we're getting there here tonight. What are you thinking?
And Joe, this is really interesting because if Andrei Vasilevsky gets the win tonight, he does make history. It will be the 300th win for him, which will be the most in the league for any goalie. I just don't see that win happening in St. Louis. I do think that storyline, it has to be back in Tampa on Thursday versus the Philadelphia Flyers. I think we'll see the Tampa Bay Lightning, like you said, they're limping into this game. I think they get up in that first period, and we know the St. Louis Blues fight back and rally back. I'm going to take a couple of things, and yes, they're going against each other, but I see the storyline playing out this way. I think the Tampa Bay Lightning win the first period, cover the puck line in the first period. That's coming in at +150. I'm going to put a half unit bet currently on the St. Louis Blues to win the full game. That's coming in at +136. But then I'm going to save the other half unit for when the Tampa Bay Lightning go up in this one and put it back in on that money line, because we should probably get closer to 2-1 to our money alive, Joe. So I'm doing a couple of things with this. I do think the St. Louis Blues get the win with Binnington. I just think Andrei Vasilevsky, 300th win, it has to happen at home on Thursday.
Yeah, I like that too. And history certainly on the Lightning side here. They've won 4 of the last 5. They scored 4 or more goals in or 4 wins against this Blues team. You would think tonight would be a good night for an offensive display here. I'm with you on this one. What about, though, the Kings coming in tonight off an impressive 3-0 win at Nashville last night, but they've certainly been inconsistent. They got Minnesota here tonight. How are you looking at this one?
Yeah, hard one here for the Kings on that second night of a back-to-back. This defense just isn't where I think it needs to be at to roll into Minnesota on the lack of rest and beat the Minnesota Wild. The Wild are too juiced on the money line, Joe. So I did one thing. I took Kaprizov for the anytime goal, parlayed that with the Wild straight up on the money line for beautiful plus money.
Sounds like cash to me, Joe. Appreciate it as always. Game Time Decisions will be back after this.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at a Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. What is he, a sixth-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in Game Time Decisions here on this Tuesday now, November the 5th, election day here in the States, but plenty going on across the sports landscape here tonight while the NBA has the night off. Well, we've got plenty of college basketball still to talk about as the season kicked off last night. Plenty between men's and women's college hoops last night. I believe some 300 games across the country took center stage, and it all culminated last night with a couple of top 25 teams there, with Baylor taking on Gonzaga. And kudos to Baylor and Gonzaga, by the way, for actually scheduling that in the opening night of college basketball. Usually we get these lopsided matchups in the first game to kick off the season, much like what we see in week 0 of the college football season, where there really isn't anybody taking any risks. It's usually complete blowout city. But it was blowout city last night with Gonzaga. But kudos to Scott Drew and to the Baylor Bears and Mark Few there at Gonzaga actually scheduling that game. I hope college hoops on opening night will do more of that in the future so we don't get as many of these, 30, 40-point wins like we did last night. It seems like all the Blue Bloods had easy cupcake victories last night, and here's Baylor and Gonzaga at almost midnight on the East Coast, getting ready to tip off in Spokane, Washington. And boy, oh boy, Baylor kind of got a wake-up call here, but Gonzaga certainly was a team that I had circled, and I know many of the pundits had circled. Too much experience, even the transfers and some of the freshmen they brought in. Gonzaga is a very dangerous team again this year. Well worth keeping an eye on them moving forward. And as far as Baylor goes, they will be just fine because Scott Drew is actually one of the best coaches in college hoops, and he's got 4 of the very best guards in the country. And in college hoops, guards means everything, especially some good ones, and they have them there. They'll be just fine, Baylor. But tonight, we go from all of those games last night to having, I believe, 8 games on the schedule here, including the Rice Owls at home taking on FIU, Florida International. And Rice has a new head coach in Rob Lanier on the sidelines here. The problem is they also, with a new coach, only returned 1 starter from last season. They did get some transfers in, but a lot of mid-major transfers there. Nobody really moving the needle. Rice is in a rebuilding situation, while FIU returns 9 seniors from that team a year ago. They play a very aggressive style of basketball. If you want to talk about full court press, it's full court press the entire game. And if you don't have quality guards or experienced guards, and Rice, like we just said, only has 1 returning starter from a year ago, a lot of new faces, FIU is going to be a matchup problem in this one here. I think a lot of turnovers are going to be there. Anytime early in the season, I get a team with that many returning players and upperclassmen at that, when you got 9 seniors playing that kind of style, yes, I think that I think turnovers are coming, easy buckets are coming. I'm shocked that we're getting 6.5 points here with FIU. I definitely think this new look Rice team is going to have their hands full here in their home opener. I would take the points here with FIU in this one. I wouldn't even think about it. I'd just go ahead and get it done. We also have a couple of other interesting games coming up, including Bethune-Cookman taking on Texas Tech here. And boy, oh boy, new look here for Texas Tech as well. And anytime you have a spread in the 30s, which is what Texas Tech, I believe, is laying here. Last I checked, I believe it was 30.5, 31. It tells you everything you need to know about what the markets think of this matchup. But I like early in the season laying numbers like this. I won't do it by the time we get a month and a half in the season. But right now, I mean, with Texas Tech, of course, their one of the best guards in the country, Pop Isaacs, has transferred to Creighton from Texas Tech. So did Joe Toussaint last year. But the Red Raiders are loaded this year. Grant McCaskill, who took over this Texas Tech program a couple of years ago in Lubbock. This is a team that is going to be looking to go to the dance for a little March Madness. It's their season opener. Bethune-Cookman, which is ranked 312th in KenPom entering this season, is not going to put up a lot of resistance. I can see the Red Raiders, who are a very physical team. They are not going to take their foot off the gas in front of the home crowd. They've got great three-point shooters on this team. This has got absolutely blowout written all over it. I would not be afraid to lay this number with Texas Tech, as I don't think Bethune-Cookman hits 50 points. That's how bad I think this one is going to be. Also, in a game that I bet earlier today, talked about it on the early line with Ben Stevens, keep an eye on this BYU team. I really like this BYU team, who is starting a new era as their former coach, Mark Pope, is now the head coach of the Kentucky Wildcats. And so now they bring in Kevin Young, who I like a lot here, leading BYU. John Schulman takes over Central Arkansas. Both of these teams, especially BYU, who usually when you get a coach that leaves, like Mark Pope, well, then guess what happens? Most of the kids that he recruited on that team usually either follow suit or they hit the transfer portal these days. and there's nothing left. Well, the cupboards are not bad in BYU. In fact, Mark Pope has left a very, very good team here in BYU. They've got a lottery pick and a big 18-year-old kid from Russia who actually played for Real Madrid in Europe last year. He's 18 years old. He is absolutely going to be drafted. He came to BYU. Cannon Catchings originally committed to Purdue, but instead enrolled at BYU instead. He has got quite the lineage. He's the nephew of WNBA and former University of Tennessee star Tamika Catchings. So basketball running in the family there. Not to mention a whole lot of weapons from a year ago that stayed there at BYU, which is going to give Coach Young an opportunity here to make some noise in the Big 12, the new home of BYU. Central Arkansas, new coach, new roster, very good shooters that they have in his team. They don't play a lick of defense, which is going to allow BYU to pretty much get any shot that they want. And if you guys understand BYU, they've never met a three they don't like to take. And I would imagine they're going to take a lot of them here tonight. I think both these teams will have some success offensively. I thought the number was low. 152 was the total. I love to go overs early in the season in games like this where you've got young teams that are going to be more interested in scoring there rather than playing defense here. And I think that's what you're going to get from Central Arkansas. They got some great shooters on this team, including an Arkansas Player of the Year from high school, Ty Robinson. Expect points in this one. It was 152. I'm already seeing it up to 154. I think BYU will have no problem getting 85, maybe even 90 points in this game. I think this is an easy over tonight with Central Arkansas and BYU. So we've got plenty of NHL. We've got some college hoops, and we got much more to talk about in the NFL as the trade deadline is come and gone. What does it all mean? We'll talk about it next here on Game Time Decisions.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class of the Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. I mean, what is he, a sixth-year player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
right, welcome back in Game Time Decisions here on the Sports Grid Network. I'm Joe Raineri. Appreciate you stopping by on this Tuesday. And we had the final opportunity for NFL teams to bolster their roster or maybe cut bait with some loose cannons in the locker room. And I got to tell you, we saw a lot of big-time names over the last couple of weeks switching uniforms, something we're not used to seeing in the NFL. But I do think there are some clear winners and some clear losers from the trades that happened earlier today as we welcome in our good friend George Kurtz to the house here, talking some NFL. And, of course, the trade deadline, George, has come and gone. And speaking of losers, let's talk about your Cowboys. If we could, because they seem to have been active today. For what reason, I have absolutely no idea, but they thought it was important maybe to add some wide receiver help. And they traded, I believe, with Carolina to get a wide receiver and gave up, I believe, a better draft pick than what they gave up for Amari Cooper a year ago. But, hey, it's Jerry. He obviously knows what he's doing. So what are your thoughts here on what you got from the Cowboys? Should they shut Dak down? Do they have a choice? Should Trey Lance play? What are we doing with the Cowboys here?
Cowboys are a mess. They're a complete mess. They're rudderless, right? They're absolutely. You don't know what they're going to do. What direction are they heading here? All right, you pick up Jonathan Mingo today. You give up a 4th-round pick for him. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Jonathan Mingo, a guy who might have been released later this year. I mean, it made very little sense here. Jerry seems to forget or not understand that Dak does not make anybody better around him. So unless he has a top-notch wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb, Dez back in the day, he doesn't make anybody better. All right, so what is Mingo going to do for you? Yes, he's a bigger guy, a bigger target, but how does this help you? And certainly it's not going to help this year. All right, you're 3-5. You're playing Philadelphia Sunday. Anyone think Dallas beating Philadelphia? Right, then you play Houston on Monday night. All right, Houston played poorly. Maybe there's a shot there. I don't think so, but maybe a shot. Then you play Washington before you get a game on Thanksgiving that maybe you can win in the Giants here. But they're very likely to be 3-8, 4-7 at best. This season is toast. So now you tell me that Jonathan Mingo is going to be a guy you need for the future? Really? Really? Jonathan Mingo? No, I don't get it. Dak is going on IR here. I mean, even the problem with this, even if Trey Lance does play, and he probably should get some snaps, Joe, right? Some kind of smattering to see what you got here. Trade deadline passed today, right? So you can't trade him. You're going to try and trade him in the offseason? Is he even signed? You know, it's just, like I said, the Cowboys are a mess. Nothing makes sense of what they're doing. Jerry took I'm all in, but yet he took the offseason off. And this is what you get, Jerry. You let all those good football players go. They all signed with everybody else but you. You didn't sign anyone, and then you wonder why you suck now. The season's lost for the Cowboys. They need to go in a completely different direction. McCarthy will be gone. Schottenheimer will be gone. Zimmer will be gone. But it won't matter because Jerry will not be gone.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it's ironic, too, because he spent all this time going back at folks who were going, well, why would you pay Ezekiel Elliott, not Derrick Henry? And what are you doing? And, of course, now he decides to give up a 4th rounder. Now, granted, Mingo's 23, but if you can't be at the top of the depth chart on a Carolina team as a wide receiver, I'm not quite sure what he's going to do here with Dallas. But we did, of course, learn first thing this morning that the Lions, we knew they needed an edge rusher. You're not going to replace Aiden Hutchinson. We knew that. But talk about a reasonable price for an established guy in Zadarius Smith from Cleveland. I thought this was another great move by the Lions, who continue to be well run from the top down. And I can't even believe I'm saying that, George.
It is weird to say the Lions are probably, in my mind, the best team in the NFL. Not just the NFC, the NFL. Right, you did add Zadarius Smith today, a little extra pass rush there. I don't think Hutchinson's coming back. All right, so I think they needed this here. Now, we knew this trade has been in the works, by the way, for about 2 weeks. We've been hearing about this for a while there. Originally, they might go get Myles Garrett, or they're going to get this guy. No, we're never going to get a top-notch guy. Those guys don't come loose here. Max Crosby. But Zadarius Smith was being dangled by Cleveland. It's not speculation. They would go to Detroit. They get the job done. I love this deal for Detroit. Love it. Actually, I kind of like it for Cleveland as well here. You get something for a player you weren't going to keep here, an older veteran here, fine. But for Detroit, I think it's exactly what they need here, a pass rush. We know how important that is in the playoffs here. So good for Detroit. And, boy, if they make it to, it'll be weird. It'll just be weird to say Detroit Lions in the Super Bowl.
I got to tell you, the Saints just listen. They fired Dennis Allen, which was long overdue. Now they got rid of Marshawn Lattimore, and kudos to the Commanders for pushing all in at 7-2 on the season, and what is a very winnable NFC East here, because I'm not sold. Obviously, we talked Dallas. I'm not sold on Philadelphia. The Commanders, very young in the secondary. Lattimore's going to slot right in and make this team better. But it does appear that the Derek Carr, Cameron Jordans, Kamaras, and the Saints, it's going to be a new era there, George. It's time for a rebuild. They should have done it when Peyton left, but they kept, trying to hold on. But I think that time is come and gone, and they know it. And it wouldn't shock me now if the tank is on with New Orleans. But great move for Washington.
Good move on both parts, right? Saints get a nice haul there. Saints are in salary cap hell, by the way.
Ooh.
They have a lot of contracts. They're well over the cap next year, no matter how much they raise this thing. And a lot of people speculate they don't know how they're going to get under it. Little surprised, Joe, that they just re-signed Kamara a couple of weeks ago. Right? I thought he might have to go too in a purge. So it is what it is. This should be a bad team for a couple of years. I don't think Carr will be back there either. I don't think they can afford Carr. I don't think it matters anymore. They're going to have to go with the rookie quarterback there. As for Washington, you already said it. They needed cornerback help. Lattimore may not be the player he once was. And by the way, I can guarantee that Mike Evans is happy he's out of that division, right? As him and Lattimore didn't really get along all that well. But he's still a good cornerback, helps Washington out here. I think Washington and Philadelphia still have to play each other 2 more times. That's very likely to decide who will win the NFC East. As you're sort of speculating there, Philadelphia seems to win despite themselves or despite Sirianni and his coaching methods here. So we'll see. Good for Washington. As a Cowboy fan, certainly not good, as now the Commanders are a problem for 10 years. They found their quarterback, and now maybe they found a cornerback for this season to help them in the playoff run.
Yeah, a very weird trade, too, but I like it, involving the Steelers. They made a couple of moves here. We'll talk about that one as more NFL talk coming up here in the trade deadline as Game Time Decisions continues here on the Grid.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class of the Heisman with those 2 games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those 2 games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. I mean, what is he, a 6th-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in Game Time Decisions here on the Sports Grid Network. Joe Raineri alongside George Kurtz. George, we've got a couple other moves here today in the NFL. One was head-scratching. No, I didn't see it coming, but the Packers, and you don't see this often, right? The Packers traded their starting defensive end, Preston Smith, to the Steelers. Now, he ain't starting in Pittsburgh with T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith there, but it cost him a 7th-round pick, and that's an interesting move both for the Green Bay Packers and the Steelers, given the fact that he's under contract through 2026. That's a big cap hit for them, even though they only give up a 7th-rounder. They also got Mike Williams from the Jets for next to nothing, but the fact that the Jets got anything for a guy that was only $1 million wide receiver that they weren't going to sign next year anyway, I think is a win for the Jets. But suddenly the Steelers are getting some depth across the board. Do you like the move?
I don't love the move for Williams. I mean, I know I've just never been a huge fan of him, right? He is a deep play threat. Russell Wilson does throw a really good deep ball, so maybe that'll help. They needed somebody there. So I don't think it's a bad move here, but I don't think it's going to break the bank. I think out of all the receivers that have moved, outside of Jonathan Mingo, mind you, out of all the others, I mean, he's like the least one I would have wanted, right? Deontay Johnson, all right, Steelers weren't going to go back down that well. Cooper, Hopkins, I would have rather paid up for those guys if you're going to go get a wide receiver. So that's my only thing there, is that I just don't think he's a guy who's going to move the needle. Plus, once again, first year back from ACL, could be a little rough here. Preston Smith, I thought was really interesting. Why did Green Bay want to get rid of him so much? All right, they're not weird for a playoff team, defensive end or a linebacker, depending on which way you're looking at it, where he's going to play. So I found Preston Smith being moved, just like I said, just strange. I didn't see that one coming.
No, well, a starting defensive end for a pretty good defensive team, it didn't make it's interesting, and he's going to go be a backup and basically provide depth for Pittsburgh. And it looks like, if this was 5 years ago, we'd be talking more about it. But the fact that Tre'Davious White is now off to the Ravens, who also we know traded for Deontay Johnson, but now they had to go and get some sort of help from the Rams in Tre'Davious White, who hasn't played since week 4. But Baltimore is so terrible defending the pass. They need any help they can get here, Kurtz. And unfortunately, the injuries with Tre'Davious White, he's a shell of what he was with Buffalo. But, again, you need depth, and Baltimore went out and got it.
I think you already said it, right? Baltimore needed somebody, bodies, anyone who can possibly cover anyone. They're a tough time against the pass. They're playing shootouts almost every week. When Bo Nix is lighting you up, you got a problem. You got to fix it there. The Rams, I guess you said he hasn't played since week 4. It wasn't really working out for them because the Rams could win that division, by the way, the NFC West. That division is wide open. I wouldn't be surprised if any of the 4 teams won there. San Fran and their health issues. Arizona, granted, they haven't beaten anybody, but they're winning football games. Seattle probably not going to win the division there. And then the Rams, with a healthy company, if Nakua's not trying to knock people out, that offense is almost as good as anybody's in football. So I'm a little surprised they would do that, but they just must not have seen White in their plans.
I don't remember, Kurtz, having this many. I mean, when you look at the AFC alone, think about the trades and the big-name guys that we have seen over the last month. Aaron Rodgers gets Devontae Adams. Josh Allen gets Amari Cooper. Lamar gets Deontay Johnson. Mahomes gets DeAndre Hopkins. Burrow gets another running back in Khalil Herbert earlier today, and now Russell gets Mike Williams. That's a lot of big names in the AFC that got traded over the last month. I don't remember a season where we were talking about that many high-profile, especially wide receivers, switching uniforms during the season.
I think it's a great point. Almost like, it's a domino effect. Oh, they added someone. Okay, now we got to add someone. It's today's football, right, Joe? Throw the football. Put the ball in the air. All right. I think for the Bengals, that we found out a couple hours after their trade for Herbert that Morse was out for the year, so they had to get somebody to replace that. All right, they were trying to keep that under wraps, even though we pretty much knew something was up there. So they needed the depth there. But his other receiver move, I think every team was answering another. Right? Kansas City needed Hopkins. He had a great game last night. Pittsburgh had to get a wide receiver. We knew that. Baltimore, okay, let's see what they get at Deontay Johnson. He goes back to the north there. We knew Buffalo needed somebody. All right. So
Yep.
a lot of these did make sense. These teams actually probably should have addressed this during the offseason. They waited till the deadline. We're seeing a new thing of a deadline. The NFL trade deadline now is becoming something. It's not the NBA, NHL, or MLB yet, but it's certainly a lot better than what it was.
I agree. And then, of course, there's the Cowboys, and we just scratch our heads trying to figure out what the heck they're doing. All right, George Kurtz, always a pleasure to see you here, my man. Loaded slate in the NHL tonight. Enjoy the puck time and game time decisions back for another hour after this here on the grid.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at the Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. I mean, what is he, a sixth-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets and when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Here on this Tuesday now, November the 5th. I'm Joe Raineri. Appreciate you stopping by as we've got a loaded slate in the NHL here tonight. NBA has the night off, but a couple of college basketball games on the hardwood and plenty of headlines today as the trade deadline in the NFL has come and gone, and a lot of very interesting moves. Did the rich get richer? Some clear winners and some clear losers here at the trade deadline, and nobody better to help us sort through it all than the one and only Adam Kaplan in the house on this Tuesday. And Adam, it was funny. We were just talking, saying, when you look at the arms race in the AFC with all of these big name wide receivers that were traded at some point over the last month to big name quarterbacks and teams that are all going to be battling, it feels like, for a playoff spot. I don't remember a season where this many high-profile guys swapped uniforms in the same season. Can you?
Yeah, Joe, you're right. In fact, we've been talking about that on Coast to Coast with Pharrell and on the Pro Football Today show on Sunday, that we usually don't see receivers traded. Very, very few get traded at this deadline. And we saw a lot of movement. I thought there might be a couple going today. I know Washington was looking at it. A couple other teams were looking at receivers, but it didn't transpire today. But the one that did happen is one I've talked about for 3 weeks, and I was like, man, is this Mike Williams trade going to happen to the Jets?
Yeah.
From the Jets to the Steelers? I put this out weeks ago, and I'm like, wow, I kind of surprised this hasn't happened. But then it happened today. We obviously can get into that. But the big trade was obviously Marshawn Lattimore. And And I got something to add to that probably no one knows about on another player they were looking at corner. But yeah, this was an interesting day because this is a team that no one thought, or very few people thought, would have a chance to make the playoffs this season in Washington. And they've kind of felt the moment, and they topped it off today. They were going for it, and this is a go-for-it move, getting Marshawn Lattimore from the Saints.
What does it mean to spell for the Saints? So, I mean, obviously they're in cap hell, but is it finally the rebuild in New Orleans? Is that what's coming ahead, do you think? And what happens to the Carrs and the Cameron Jordans of the world and Chase Youngs? What happens afterwards here with these guys?
Yeah, so Chase Young's on a one-year deal, but let's talk about Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn Lattimore, still technically only 28 years old, a little bit younger. He was a first rounder in 2017. Really talented player, but been injured a lot. Hamstring problems going back to Ohio State. He actually didn't play last week due to a hamstring issue. But all trades, by the way, they're not completed until the player passes physical. Like Khalil Herbert, not only did he pass his physical today, he's actually practicing tonight with the Bengals. We'll get to that later. But let's get to Marshawn Lattimore. Very talented player. Didn't have much of a future. Major cash due in future years. The Saints weren't going to pay that, as I understand it. They were looking to move him. They found a team that wanted him. There were actually other teams involved, but this is the one team that was willing to give up future draft capital, a bunch of draft picks to do it. So the Saints, on your question, Joe, they're a team that has been sort of stuck in neutral, 7, 8, or 9 wins, seemingly the last couple of years. Who are they as a football team? They started off setting team records for offense the first 2 weeks where they were 2-0. Then the Eagles went into New Orleans and beat them surprisingly without A.J. Brown. That started their downfall. And then they had a bunch of injuries. Derek Carr with his oblique injury. Too many guys hurt, and they were underachieving. And Dennis Allen, the head coach, got fired, as you know, this week. So they're in sort of a semi-rebuild here. They don't know who their future quarterback is going to be. They have no idea who that's going to be. And Mickey Lewis, the general manager, made this decision. It's his call with input. And they made this move. And now Washington, who I'm told not only was on Marshawn Lattimore, who they got, they actually looked into, I'm told, J.C. Horn of the Panthers. They were told, and other teams were told, Joe, he was not available. But they looked into a bunch of quarterbacks. And they got Marshawn Lattimore today. So what they're going to do here, Marshawn Lattimore will start on the outside at corner. And then what they'll probably wind up doing is move Mike Sainristil, their second-round DB out of Michigan, who'd been playing outside corner. Look for him to be their nickel defensive back, where he's really best suited. That's where teams thought he'd play. And Marshawn Lattimore will be that outside corner, which they really needed. But what they didn't get today, Joe, was a receiver. That was the one missing piece. I thought to be a big-time playoff team, but they got that corner, Marshawn Lattimore.
I guess no shock. There were reports, Adam, too, that, agents were saying that Washington is now a destination that players don't mind being open to. So new ownership, we got new coaching staff. It's a new era for Washington football, isn't it?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So basically, you've got Dan Quinn, super positive guys, been to the Super Bowl, talking to Washington. He's kind of transformed their culture. Everybody loves working under and playing under Dan Quinn. So he's a guy that's done a great job so far. And it's not, by the way, it's not a great roster. Let's call it like it is. They've overachieved so far. It's been a great story. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is the centerpiece of all this. Way ahead of schedule. Been phenomenal. Just like C.J. Stroud last year. No, remember, a lot of teams didn't like C.J. Stroud. I can tell you that for a fact, but Texans got it right with C.J. Stroud. He's well ahead of schedule, obviously. It's been great. Great story. Although, look, the Texans are down 2 starting receivers. That's why his numbers aren't as good. But let's get back to Jaden Daniels. He is so good throwing the football. He doesn't turn it over. He's great running the football. A leader already. I'm told he gets into their building at 5:30 a.m. every day, Joe.
Wow.
So you got to love it. Yeah, it's been a great story. But look, when you're Washington and you're feeling it, you're like, wow, we probably didn't think we were going to be this good. And you are that good. You might as well be aggressive, and they did that. Give Adam Peters credit, their general manager. He's not bashful here. He's aggressive. He's not afraid to be great. He took a page out of John Lynch's playbook, his old boss with the Niners, everything they've done there. So this is a big-time move. And you know what's kind of cool, Joe? For everybody would bag that team and criticize Daniel Snyder, who's out, obviously his owner. Now you've got Josh Harris. His ownership group owns the Sickers and the Devils and other sports properties. And give Josh Harris credit. He had to sign off on this. There's a lot of cash that's due to Marshawn Lattimore for future years. They'll have to get through his contract after this season. There's a lot of money due next season that's not guaranteed. They're going to have to figure that out, what they're going to do. But it's all about this season. They're not worrying about that. This is a big-time move for a team that's making a big jump here in the NFC East.
Yeah, and I love it. I mean, they got basically they ended up getting a third rounder, right, for a disgruntled, former first rounder there, and they get themselves a number one cornerback that they've needed here. I can't wait to see how this works out for Washington. It's a new era. But you mentioned there's a game coming up Thursday night in the AFC North that's pretty important, and Baltimore made a couple of moves, Deontay Johnson, and then they get Tre'Davious White from the Rams earlier today. They need as much help as they can get in that secondary because they're not very good against the pass here, Cap. So what are we seeing with these two teams heading into Thursday?
Yeah, I would say this with Baltimore, right? I would say this with Baltimore. Their depth at receiver is not very good. That's what we did the trade for Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson now, and by the way, he's not starting, but it gives them ability to play 11 personnel, 3 receivers, 1 back, 1 tight end. But their primary set is 2 tight ends because they're 3 deep. And then when you really look at it with Tre'Davious White, he used to be a great corner. He no longer is. He's a 4th corner. He gives some depth, and they've got a little bit of a depth issue at corner anyway. So that's why they made that trade. And by the way, the Rams almost certainly would have cut Tre'Davious White. He had no future with the Rams going forward anyway.
Yeah, well, he hadn't played since I think week 4. And Khalil Herbert, not a bad move for Cincinnati. They had to do something with Moss out, right?
Yeah, they had to. With Chase Brown needed help, and Khalil Herbert was out of a job with Chicago. He was their 3rd back. He had been inactive. I love this trade. By the way, they're practicing tonight, the Bengals are, and he's practicing. So that would tell me maybe he got some carries in this game going forward. And they ran out of running backs. He's going to have to play, quite frankly.
A little less wear and tear as well. Adam Kaplan, NFL Insider, as always, my man. Appreciate the time. Game Time Decisions continues on the grid.
Enter into the magical world of McLuck.com, where even the smallest of spins can win real cash prizes. Adventure into over 1,000 of the best Vegas-style slot games. So what are you waiting for? Unlock your free welcome offer today. Join the fun where winners play and players win.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back to Game Time Decisions. Listen, back by popular man, the phone was ringing off the hook. You guys want Adam Kaplan back for another segment, and guess what? Boom! You got him back. We got plenty more NFL to talk about. It was a busy trade deadline, 4 o'clock Eastern time here, Cap, today. And one of the moves that I thought was kind of head-scratching was Mike Williams. You had reported that week to Pittsburgh. We knew this, but the Preston Smith, the starting defensive end for Green Bay, heading to Pittsburgh that was a very, you don't often see this, but what was the story behind this?
So, Joe, first of all, rarely do you see good teams trading with good teams. I get they're in another conference, but wouldn't it be ironic if the Packers played the Steelers in the Super Bowl? But here's the craziness. So you're trading a starting defensive end who does turn 32 on November 17th. I get that. He's not the same player he once was. He's going to be a backup for Pittsburgh, but here's why they did it. Lucas Van Ness, who was the first round out of Iowa last season, they want him as a starter. He's got positional versatility. You could stand him up. He could play with his hand down. This guy was drafted to be a starter, so they want to do this now. Typically, you do this in the offseason. You don't do this now. It definitely was surprising, but he's got a big contract. Smith took a pay cut earlier this season, so his base salary now is only $3.2 million. It's prorated for the rest of the season. So they're going to owe him very little. The Steelers. Now, as you said, you're right. He's going to be a backup. Now, next season they're going to have to look at his deal. $12 million in base salary, not guaranteed. So obviously he's not coming back on that salary if he's coming back at all as a backup. So he'll have to take a pay cut. But the bottom line is this is a depth move. So why did the Steelers want him when he's not going to start? Well, Nick Herbig, who's their third edge rusher, right? Who's really good. He's one of the better backup edge rushers. He's on injury reserve. They really don't have any depth there. Remember T.J. Watt's missed time over the last couple of years. They're being careful here. Because, listen, after the trade deadline, the only way you get guys is if they're on the street. And there's no one out there as an edge rusher who can come in and play right away. And the scheme, by the way, they're playing similar schemes, the Packers and the Steelers. So this made a lot of sense from that standpoint. But I'm like you here. You don't see good teams acquire players from good teams. It's rarely done like that. You don't see that. In fact, in Major League Baseball, you really see let's say there's a team that needs a fourth pitcher, right? You don't see them get a fourth pitcher from another good team. You just don't see that. But again, devil's in the details. Preston Smith, Joe, is going to be a backup, and that's why this happened.
And a very good, I mean, listen, Pittsburgh knows what they're up against here as the schedule gets a little daunting in the second half. Injuries are always a worry. It's good to have a veteran there to back them up. But can you explain to me, I mean, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how good Detroit from the top of the brass all the way down. This seems to be a very well-run organization here, Cap. Some we're not used to saying. You lose your stud Aiden Hutchinson, and then you go out and pull out a Zadarius Smith trade for next to nothing. Seems to be a very well-run organization at the moment.
It is. Now, Zadarius Smith, like Preston Smith, is an older player. We have to understand that. That's why he was available. And obviously, Cleveland is a bad team. They're not going anywhere. So they're looking towards the future. They get something for next year. It's not a lot, but they get something. But the bottom line with Zadarius Smith is he could still rush the passer. The prime pass rushers, Joe, were not available. So this is the next level. He'll help them immediately. He's going to go to a team in Detroit that's playing in a scheme that he clearly could handle. There's no question about it. I like Zadarius Smith. And by the way, you could play him inside a nickel at defensive tackle because we see a lot of teams do that so-called NASCAR package. But you could play him inside if you want to. Good football player, pretty good leader. I like this move for Detroit. They had to do something. You mentioned Aiden Hutchinson. I'm just blown away. Their defense is still as good as it is without him, who's not only their best defensive player, might be their best player overall. And Cleveland, again, is looking towards the future. But I like this move. And I give Brad Holmes credit. This GM, he is so good. One of the best evaluators in the National Football League. And let's not forget, Joe, nobody thought they'd be good a couple years ago under Dan Quinn. He's turned things around. What a great job he's done.
Yeah, and Cap, I mean, thinking along those lines, there were a couple of teams that we thought would make more moves. One of them was the Giants, who had a pass rusher everyone thought was going to be available. They certainly could have used future picks to fortify this roster. And the Jets, but I guess expecting the Jets to maybe start throwing the towel in is a little premature at this point, but maybe they could have done more as well to build for the future. Are you shocked?
But look, they made the trade of Mike Williams. Okay, that had to happen. He had no future with them. I get it. Alan Lazard's on IR. That was why sort of some people thought maybe they would keep him. But in my reporting, he was always going to be traded. I don't know why it took to today to do it, but it doesn't matter. The trade deadline happened today. Pittsburgh needed him. I want to get to them in a second. But yeah, look, Pittsburgh has their situation, but the Jets, they're still hanging in there. I know 3-6.
Yeah.
Joe, you might look at the record like, are you out of your mind? There's no way they're making the playoffs. But they're still alive for a wild card spot. Denver lost. That was pretty big. They're hanging in there. They got to get Aaron Rodgers playing better. Their schedule, by the way, is really hard. I would be worried if I was a Jets fan, but let's get to Pittsburgh and Mike Williams. They needed help opposite George Pickens. If you want to be a deep playoff team, you got to get a receiver. They had to do that. Mike Williams, who I'm told they actually were trying to get to visit them in free agency, but he signed with the Jets. So now they got their guy, and he'll start opposite George Pickens. This is a good move for them. And look, you know that Russell Wilson loves that deep ball. Mike Williams could go get it. George Pickens could go get it. When Roman Wilson comes back, he could eventually be their third receiver. Remember, Wilson's barely played. He's been hurt. He was a guy that they thought was starting the season. That's why they made this trade, Joe.
Yeah, and listen, you got to love teams trying to get better at this point in the NFL down the stretch. This game coming up Thursday, though, Cap, is it Cincinnati's got a very favorable schedule. If they can win this game Thursday, are they making the playoffs?
It's still going to be hard. Their defense has been severely disappointing. I'm surprised at their defense. That's a team I'm going to wind up getting wrong. I don't see them getting the playoffs. I really don't. They're not a consistent football team until they get their defense righted here. Lou Anarumo is really good, their D coordinator. I just don't know why they can't get to back where they were last season. But if they could win, it would certainly help.
Yeah, amazing. You lose Bates in the secondary, and they're a shell of themselves. Unbelievable. Adam Kaplan, always a pleasure. We may see you back next segment. You never know if people start complaining again. Game Time Decisions will be back next.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class of the Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. You know, I mean, what is he, a sixth-year player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in Game Time Decisions here on this Tuesday, Election Day around the country, and we still got plenty going on in the world of sports. Of course, the NFL trade deadline has come and gone. We've been talking about how teams have certainly looked to get themselves in a better position, and I think it's, we talked about Detroit earlier, with the Zadarius Smith trade with Cleveland, doing anything to bolster that defensive pass rush, given the fact that they've lost one of the best. You can't replace Aiden Hutchinson, but certainly Detroit is doing what they need to do. And listen, they've won games against Green Bay. They've won games against Minnesota, their division rivals, without Aiden Hutchinson. And yet they didn't have to break the bank to bolster that defensive line. So kudos to Detroit. I think we all witnessed last night just how unbelievably ridiculous the Kansas City Chiefs have been in plugging the holes on that ship here, folks. You do realize that the injuries have been absolutely crazy for them starting just before the season started. I mean, we're talking about injuries ravaged this Kansas City Chiefs team, especially the wide receiver unit. So what does Brian Veach do, the general manager? Well, he gets with Patrick Mahomes, he gets with Andy Reid, and then he goes out and gets himself, DeAndre Hopkins. Like, you've got to be kidding me. You just watched the Kansas City Chiefs game for the first time last night. You'd think D-Hop has been on this team with Patrick Mahomes for the last 5 years. 8 catches, 86 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And not to mention that it looks like Mahomes, when it was on the line, Mahomes was looking for, guess who? It wasn't Kelsey, it was D-Hop. So already they've got chemistry there. He is fit right in there. They've also went out and got pass rusher Josh Uche from New England, and only had to give up a conditional 5th round. I mean, when you look at what Kansas City has done to try and plug these holes that were created because of injuries, you gotta, hats off to the Kansas City Chiefs. They certainly should be mentioned, although they didn't make any crazy move today. They have had to make moves leading up to today, and you saw it again for a team that is going for a historic Super Bowl three-peat, something that we don't see anymore in this day and age. The idea that they were able to absorb those injuries, especially to the wide receivers, and address it and go out and get a player like DeAndre Hopkins for next to nothing. Kudos to this Kansas City. That is why they are going, by the way, for a three-peat. It's a very well-run organization, and that should not shock anybody that here they are as one of the only undefeated teams left, preventing the Miami Dolphins from 1972 cracking open champagne. There will be no champagne being cracked in Miami just yet as they look to continue their undefeated season. They will have a short week this week, but they are certainly, even in a couple of weeks when they head to Orchard Park, the look-ahead line there, they'll still be a road favorite of about 1.5. And judging from what we saw last night, they absolutely deserve to be. Also, we should mention that we do have the college football, the very first edition of the college football playoff rankings being released here tonight. And it looks like, and this shouldn't shock anybody, the bottom line is we are going to be arguing. We've gone from a 4-team playoff to a 12-team playoff this year, right? And every year there's always some sort of argument between the 4th or the 5th team. Well, there's going to be a whole lot of arguments from the 8th seed to the 12th seed from this point moving forward. We do have, it looks like, a consensus. Oregon is going to open up as the number 1 in this expanded 12-team field. Off to a dominant start here, wins over Ohio State, Michigan, and Illinois. They were the consensus. All of the reports that I saw, it did look like Oregon was going to be in the top spot. And makes sense. They should be in the top spot there. As far as the rest of the teams rounding out the top five, we'll talk about those coming up. Teams that include Miami, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas. In what order? We'll tell you next year as Game Time Decisions continues.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at a Heisman with those two games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those two games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. I mean, what is he, a sixth-year player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in Game Time Decisions here on the SportsGrid Network. I'm Joe Raineri. Appreciate you stopping by as we've got, well, a little something for everyone here tonight. Election day in the country, but that's not stopping the NHL from being off and running. A loaded slate on the ice here tonight that is underway. We've got Boston and Toronto on the ice right now. No score in that one. That is a series in which the Boston Bruins have dominated the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially in the regular season over the last couple of years. And the Bruins looking sitting at 6-6. Both these teams are about as 500 and mediocre as we have seen. But both teams in need of a win here. We've got no score there halfway through the first. We've got Calgary and the Canadiens, no score there. The Flyers have opened up the scoring against the Carolina Hurricanes, 1-0 in that one. Buffalo at the KeyBank Center in Buffalo, New York, on a 3-game losing streak, just scored there to get ahead of the Senators, 1-0. We talked to Joe Madden last hour about tonight's slate of games, 11 games on the ice. We both agreed that Buffalo and maybe the over might not be a bad look in that one, and Buffalo has gotten the scoring early in that one. We are getting ready for the puck to drop here at the UBS Arena in Elmont, New York, also known as, well, Belmont. The Penguins and the Islanders. We've got no score there as that's just getting ready to get underway. Injury concerns, certainly for the Islanders. Sorokin in goal for the Islanders here, and under is the play that we were looking at. And then, of course, you've got Kings Wild, Lightning and the Blues. You got the Utah Hockey Club in Winnipeg, Canucks, Ducks, Kraken, Avalanche. And we're going to end the night with the Columbus Blue Jackets playing the San Jose Sharks. So we got much more to get to on the ice here as we welcome in one and only Dave Sharapan, who no doubt is representing the Canadian. Of course he is. He's representing the Montreal Canadiens here tonight. We'll get into that game coming up, Dave, but it looks like we've got the first edition of the college football playoff rankings. Top 5 teams, no shock, Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, and Texas. Those are your top 5, but I guess it's important for people to understand that these rankings will correlate with the projected seeding in a 12-team playoff here. So it looks like Oregon is projected to be a 1 seed, Georgia projected to be a 2 seed, Miami the 3 seed, and then go from there on what you think. I mean, BYU came in as the 9th-ranked team, Dave, but they're a potential 4 seed because who's going to win the Big 12? It ain't Kansas State, so it ain't Utah. Who's left but undefeated BYU? I think this is going to be fascinating watching it unfold as the next couple of weeks go by.
It's fascinating. Great to see you, Joe. There's a little thing called the election going on tonight, so I don't know how many people are watching and listening, but I hope they are because me and Wetzel are going to do in-game live, and the NBA's off, hockey's going on, so we'll discuss hockey. But the college football thing is fascinating. This is the first year for it, and odds makers are not guessing, but it's an educated guess trying to figure all of this out, where teams go. I'm already getting text. What's the number for this game? What's the number for that game? Theoretically, we're not making numbers on theoretical games. We could do it,
right?
And anybody could do it. Was there anything that surprised you, like when you saw that? Listen, BYU has surprised a lot of people all season, and the fact that it looks like they are going to win their conference or could win their conference and get that 4 seed with that spot, that's a big spot for them. And then the other thing that surprised me was that Boise State gets the 12th. Like, they got to get them in, but they're going to win the Mountain West. So the non-Power 5 conference team gets in. They're the last seed. They're going to be gigantic underdogs. And the other thing that got me, Joe, was Penn State lost to Ohio State. And we can discuss that if you want to rehash it. I'm over it. It took me all day Saturday to get over it, but they get Notre Dame. Bring it on, Joe. I'm ready. Let's go, baby.
But quite honestly, isn't that a blessing in disguise? Because if I'm Penn State, you're a favorite big time across the board for the rest of your games. You're going to be a 1-loss team. And that number 5 seed looks like they'd be in a spot at a 1-loss team to play an ACC or, maybe a Big Ten backup. You don't want to have to play Oregon right off the bat, do you? I mean, I don't think that would be great, but I do think the Ohio State-Indiana game, the winner of that game is going to have to deal with Oregon in the Big Ten championship. If I'm Penn State, I'm good with 1 loss. Give me that 5 seed. I'll have a much better matchup than I would if I had beaten Ohio State and then have to go and beat Oregon. I don't hate it, Dave, actually. But we all know James Franklin in big games.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time, Joe. It's not the worst thing in the world. Think about it.
I agree.
If you don't win your conference championship or play in the conference championship game, that's 1 less game you got to play. And the way it sets up, that bracket has 6-7 for the Notre Dame Penn State game, which would then mean a date with Destiny in Georgia. And neither one of those teams, I hate to break it to you, and I'm a proud Penn State alum, is beating Georgia. So you don't got to worry about that. Even in a neutral site bowl game, which, again, they'll slot the first round games or home games, which is cool. I think that's great. The second round are going to be at the traditional bowl sites, and then they're going to play their way in, to the championship game from, another bowl site and go from there. So they all become neutrals after that. But let it begin. I mean, baseball season's done. Let the college football debates begin. I love it. It's great for business. It's great for content. It's great for nights when you're looking at stuff and you're like, I don't know what we're going to talk about, or I don't know what we're going to bet on, or all this stuff. You can start to position yourself with to make the playoff bets because those odds are very fluent. Like they constantly have to be adjusted, looked at based on conjecture, speculation, which again, there's a lot of markets that do that, but this is kind of fun. College basketball.
I like the 5th seed, though. I just tell you this because
it's not bad. It's not bad.
The 5th seed will get a home game. They'll host a playoff game, and it'll be either or a Big 12 champion, which even if it's BYU, they got to travel on the road, right? I mean, you can either a Big 12 or an ACC team will await them, but having that home playoff game, not a neutral site game, that's a huge advantage for a team like Penn State to go into another conference to come there and play in January, Dave? I mean, that's a different animal.
I've been to games there in December. Late November.
Right.
Tahanksgiving weekend. It's freezing then. It could be terrible, terrible cold weather in January.
Yep.
Hard to get to. Tailgating might look a little different. It might sound a little different. Those crowds sound with the muffled gloves and all the padded jackets. You can't really move much. It might muffle the noise, but that's going to be
advantage.
Huge home field advantage. Huge home field advantage. Especially if they get a warm weather team.
A huge advantage coming their way if there is certainly any upsets here. But college football is right. It's ready. The first is out. Much more still to be determined. Great slate of games this week. We got plenty going on in the NHL. Dave, we'll dive into some of these games coming up and get your thoughts as Game Time Decisions continues here on the grid.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class at the Heisman with those 2 games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those 2 games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. I mean, what is he, a 6th-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in Game Time Decisions here on the SportsGrid Network. Joe Raineri alongside Dave Sherpin. He'll be taking the baton, as they say, coming up top of the hour. Him and Scotty Wetzel in game live. Plenty going on in the NHL here tonight. No NBA games slated. You got 8 college basketball games. Dave, College Hoops is back. It's good to see again. And, of course, huge games coming up in college football this week as well as the NFL. But you are wearing a Canadian hat, the Montreal Canadiens, in fact, who are no score right now with the Flames. You got Bruins and Maple Leafs, no score in that one. Buffalo's up 1-0 over Ottawa. And they just started with the your Penguins against the Islanders. Dave, what were you thinking in this one? Islanders are all banged up here, but do we like the Penguins to win this one?
No, I've been anti-Peg recently. No, I'm leaning Islanders. Unders the play in the game. I think the favorite thing about that. There's going to be some games today. I think you're going to see a lot of goals in a few games and minimal goals in a lot of games. That one's special shout out to our friends up in Canada listening and watching the show right now. I got a guy named Justin. He just tweeted at both of us. Main prize. We appreciate you watching and listening. There's a couple games later, Joe, Utah and Winnipeg, that I can't wait to watch, let alone talk about and possibly look to play in game. That might be one where it's a big price and you go, okay, I'm not comfortable laying that. Maybe play to Winnipeg in regulation if you want. But if they get down a goal, that's the play. You just you play Winnipeg, sit and wait there. Vancouver and Anaheim. I saw that game later and I went, all right, how do we even price that? Because Vancouver's got to be favored, but by how much?
Right.
Well, odds makers have spoken. I mean, this is over 2-1. Which I don't like doing. I still feel like it's early in the season and don't have all of the information. So, like, I know when I did it, I was really hesitant to make anybody too much more than a $2 favorite on the road. But Vancouver's supposed to win that game every game. And then, we'll talk to Joe Madden. We'll talk to Cam Stewart later. Columbus and San Jose. Joe, how do you make anyone favorite in that game? How do you make anybody favorite in that game?
That is cruel. You got to be. To me, it's got to be. It's very, very difficult to pick against. I think San Jose here at that price because I do think they have an opportunity to win this game with Columbus coming off of back-to-back losses, but they did play Washington and Winnipeg. But I mean, listen, they beat LA, they beat Utah, they've won 3 of their last 5 games. That being San Jose, so why not a shot there? I have an interesting one, Dave, in one of these late games involving the Kraken at the Colorado Avalanche. The Kraken have been shut out in back-to-back games, right? They lost to Ottawa and they lost to Boston. They haven't scored a damn goal. The first period over, 1.5 goals. If a team is coming off a shutout or was shut out the previous game, the over 1.5 goals in the next game is 17-4 on the season, Dave.
Hello.
So what are you thinking? Seattle now has not gone back-to-back games where they haven't scored a goal. I'm not worried about Colorado getting one. I do think we're probably getting one from Seattle in here. What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's a pretty good sample size to go and bet.
That's huge.
But my initial thought of the game was under because I've been watching the scores. I haven't been watching the game so much with Seattle in them.
Right.
But back to back, I mean, that's a long time to go without a goal. That's just one of those ones where you.
Yep.
Do you look to fade that, Joe, or do you look to bet on that trend? There's a lot of people listening, and I say it all the time: trends are your friends until they're not. Are you late if you come in and you go, "Oh, I'm betting the first period over"? That's a 17-4. That's going to go over, and then you check the score at the end of this one, and it's Colorado 1-0, and you're like, "What did I do?"
Well, the good news is we may not need Seattle to score and still get 2 goals, right? So that with Colorado, that gives us a bet. If it was Pittsburgh or the Islanders they were playing, I would say, but, Colorado could carry this themselves. But the reality is, if I'm Seattle, don't I feel a little pressure? I haven't scored a goal in 2 straight games. Like, I need to come out firing here against Colorado in some way, shape, or form. I don't hate it. The trend, like you said, is only a friend if it cashes. So, but 17-4 is enough to make me interested there. And what about Vasilevsky going for his 300th win? That's just crazy with Tampa Bay. This is Binnington and Vasilevsky, and I'm laughing. I'm going, if this was 5 years ago, it would be a dead under. Just give me the dead under. I don't care what it is. First team to score wins.
Right. Which again, I thought that this morning and then looked at it and went, oh, this isn't as easy as that. This isn't, I don't know if I can just consciously just play this blindly. This might be a first period under, though. This might be one of those ones, right, where you look at this, you get a slow start, you get under 1.5 goals. Maybe it's the problem is, if you get power plays, this is going to go over. I like Tampa in the game. I think they get it. They get him his win. All of this happens tonight on the road.
Yep.
But the Blues have been feisty. There's been games where you look at it and you're like, all right, you go against the Blues, and they win. So I don't think it's a shoo-in. Again, some of these favorites are just overpriced. And again,
crazy.
I've said it over and over where I still think it's early in the season. Some people were like, Dave, we're a dozen games into the season. We should know this by now. Still feeling things out in the NHL till about the quarter pole, till about 20 games in. Then I feel like I got enough information. More guessing than knowing right now in hockey for me.
Well, except for Boston, who we know owns Toronto, so we might as well just take Boston.
That's true.
In this one, if it ain't broke, we ain't fixing it. There, Dave. Some things are a given, right? Death, taxes. And of course, Boston beating Toronto in the regular season. So we got no problem there. All right, want to get your thoughts on the trades that we saw today in the NFL. We'll do that next here in Game Time Decisions.
Are you okay with him moving to the head of the class of the Heisman with those 2 games? Because he wasn't even in the discussion before those 2 games.
This is a big opportunity for Dylan if he wants to continue to make his case for the Heisman Trophy, and I think he's shown that. What is he, a 6th-tier player who's going to probably end up setting most of the passing marks because he's been around for so long? So why not also throw a Heisman Trophy in the mix?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back. Game Time Decisions here on the Sports Grid Network as we close out this edition. Dave Sharapan hanging out with us, getting ready to do in-game live coming up in a few minutes here with the one and all Scotty Wetzel. Plenty of NHL action for you guys to talk about here tonight, Dave. Also, college basketball on tap. We do have a pretty good NFL Thursday night game ahead of us this week in the AFC North with the Ravens and the Bengals, but it's your Steelers that made a couple of moves here today. Impressive. They needed a wide receiver. They went out and got Mike Williams from the Jets. They got backup for TJ Watt in Preston Smith, defensive end from Green Bay, and all of a sudden Pittsburgh sitting at 6-2, Dave. Oh, they look like they're gearing up, ready to make a run. How confident are you in them?
I know the schedule the rest of the way. It's going to be very, very difficult. But I think at this point, 6-2, you couldn't have signed for a better number. Coming off a bye and going to Washington. Washington, obviously, the odds-on favorite to win the division. I mean, them and Philly are right there. Get this one on Sunday, and I think the Steelers have a legitimate shot of being in the discussion for the division, which would give them a home game, which would then make them a real possibility to beat Kansas City in a one-gamer. All right, they got to go through Buffalo or Baltimore on the way, most likely. I don't know. I think they should be in that fourth spot behind Houston on that board right there. I'm not sold on Houston. I know Houston would be the division winner, and that's kind of the way those odds shape up. You know, the 4 division winners and then everybody else. I guess the trades today push them ahead of Cincy, who's playing Thursday night. Cincy's playing for their life every game the rest of the way. They could probably afford to lose one more game the way things are shaping up. So we'll find out a lot about the division on Thursday because if Cincy beats Baltimore, we're really open for business in Pittsburgh. That would give them, a shot at the driver's seat all alone.
Huge.
They haven't played a division game yet, Joe. So I think there's still a lot to be determined, but filling in the holes is not something the Steelers have done in recent years since the Minka trade.
No.
And I ain't gonna lie, I'm excited. I'm excited. We're back, baby. We're a legitimate shot, like to be a real playoff contender.
Yeah. No, listen, I love I love the fact that they're making those kinds of moves at this point here. They've gone through a quarterback change already, right? But they've also 6-2 put themselves in a prime spot. And the Ravens got Tre'Davious White there from the Rams. He hadn't played since week 4 and he's a shell of what he was. But you gotta love the fact that the Ravens can't stop the pass and Cincinnati is going to pass all over them. It feels like a dead over game too. No, how are we getting a defensive battle here?
I don't know. The only way is if like somebody gets hurt early or it turns into a blowout and we fall just short of the total. I think they trade scores. I think we find like we've got a good entertaining game on Thursday. So. Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. The other game I wanted to mention with you while I had you here was the Jets going to Arizona. I don't know about you, Joe. I've seen enough from the Jets. I'm not sold on anything. And they're trading guys who are backups, which again, I saw Rodgers today with Pat. And he's like, yeah, I wish Mike Welly's going to get more opportunities. Arizona's got something cooking down in the desert. It's only one and a half. And all the sharp guys are already waiting to come and bet the Jets because they got it right last Thursday. They had the long rest.
Yep.
What are you thinking there? What are you thinking?
Well, I think you left out the rest of the quote there. He wished Mike Williams all the best. And he also said, I hope he runs the right routes for Kyler Murray. Because apparently he wasn't running the right routes for Aaron Rodgers. Listen. The Jets, you want to talk about a little room for error. With Denver losing last week against Baltimore, they did give the Jets at least hope to make the turnaround. The schedule is favorable for the Jets, but this is a game they're going to have to win. We'll see if they can extra rest and all. We'll see if they learned anything about themselves But you will cover this with Scotty Wetzel, Dave. And as always, we appreciate you stopping by here as Game Time Decisions. We'll pass off the baton to In Game Live is next. They'll have updates in college basketball as well as the NHL for you and cover all that's happening in the NFL. We'll see you again tomorrow for another edition of Game Time Decisions. Good luck with the games. We'll see you again soon.